Hi, my name is Don Bold. I'm the pastor at Henrietta Christian Fellowship, and what you're about to watch is a 10-minute summary, 10 minutes or less, we hope, of the message that was delivered on today, which is September 29th, 2013. The title of the message is Prayer, the Unfolding Revelation. We've been doing this series on faith, worship, and prayer. And we talked about how everybody exercises faith. Everybody believes in something, even if they believe in themselves. There's something they believe in, and they exercise faith to do so. We talked about how everybody worships. There's this something inside of us that searches for something more, something that we live our life for, and that so we give ourselves to it, and that's worship. And so everybody worships. But the one thing, not everybody prays. It is believers in God who pray. And we're a little different when it comes to this, that we do actually call upon God to help us with things. And so we're going to go back to Revelation, and we're going to start to look at this unfolding revelation. God doesn't really always just give you the whole thing right at the beginning. He may give you a little piece at a time, and by doing that, what he's doing is he's giving you opportunity to learn, but he's also drawing you into relationship as you seek for more revelation. And so the first thing I want to take a look at is at this period of time in the Bible where Adam and Eve have fallen from God's grace in the Garden of Eden. They've been put out of the garden. And then this time when Cain and Abel get into this conflict, and Cain kills his brother Abel. And by the end of that chapter, God has so withdrawn himself from people, because if you look early in the chapter, God is speaking to Cain. All right, Cain isn't praying. Cain is just about his business, and God is speaking to him. But then after this, apparently, God has now withdrawn himself a bit from people. And so at the end of that chapter, in chapter 4, verse 26 of Genesis, it says this, "And to Seth, to him also, there was born a son, and his name was called Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord." And I believe this is the beginning of the unfolding of God's revelation about prayer to us, is that this idea of calling upon the name of the Lord. And, we see it here at the end of this chapter. And then we move on a little further in Genesis in chapter 12, verse 8, and we see Abraham. And at significant events in his life, he would build an altar to the Lord and call upon the name of the Lord on that altar. And so let me just read this to you. It says, "He proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord." Genesis 21:33, another place that he went near Beersheba, and he called upon the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Then we move on to Isaac, and we see Isaac doing the same. Isaac settled down, though, in the place where he had this revelation and where he called upon the name of the Lord. And it says this in Genesis 26, verses 23 through 25. "Then he went up from there to Beersheba. The Lord appeared to him in the same night and said, 'I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear. I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham.' So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord." But then he goes on to say that he pitched his tent there and had his servants dig a well. And then later in the chapter, we hear that one of the servants is now coming to him and telling him that they found water, that the well was successful. So Isaac settles down in this place where he has this revelation of God and where he calls upon the name of the Lord. And I believe that's the beginning of God encouraging us into a life of prayer. Because God's people, prior to this, they were not a praying people, because God was more in their presence. But then there comes this time where we're having to call out to Him, and so I would encourage you that at the beginning of your prayers, take time. We're in such a hurry, but take time and just call upon the name of the Lord. Call out to Him and wait for the Lord. "They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They'll mount up with wings as eagles." Okay, and it goes on. All right, so to call upon God and to wait for Him. Okay, the scriptures are filled with references to our need to call upon God and wait for Him. All right, and the words that are being used for call here, let me just give you an understanding. It says to call out, to recite, to read, to cry out, to proclaim, to utter a loud sound. Okay, so to understand that this is not always a quiet thing. I know that we tend to have this little mousy voice that we pray in, but I want to encourage you that those who have sought after the Lord, and successfully so, oftentimes have not been afraid to be people who called out to their God. So then we move on from there into taking a look at the earliest references to prayer in the Bible. And again, we're back in Genesis, and I'm not going to go into all the specific cases, but trust me on this much, or else take a look and look them up for yourself, that the first references to prayer were Abraham praying for people who then, as a consequence of his prayer, were healed, it says, and they were able to have children. The next ones that we see are appeals for protection. A lot of the early prayers in the Bible are prayers for protection from God, prayers for provision, not as much, but healing and protection were big issues in prayer, as we see it in this unfolding revelation. Again, at church, I gave this example of a loaf of bread that was presented to me in Ukraine that was all wrapped up in this long banner. And and I had to unwrap this thing to eventually get to this bread, and then I didn't know what to do with the bread, and so I had to find out what to do, and this unfolding revelation that God is bringing. And so we're going to move over from this, and we're going to start looking at Exodus 33. Why? Well, because we get this beautiful opportunity to look into the prayer life of Moses, the servant of God. And the circumstances are that when Moses went up to get the Ten Commandments, the people began to practice idolatry and were worshiping a golden calf. And so Moses comes down and he sees the people doing this, and God begins his dealings with them there. But now in the beginning of chapter 33, let's take a look. Okay, it says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, 'Depart, go up from here, you and the people that you brought up from the land of Egypt, and to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, saying to your descendants, I will give it. I will send an angel before you to drive out the people that are there,' he says, but me, I'm not going, because I might destroy you on the way up there, because you're so obstinate," okay? And so, moving on, the people respond to this in mourning. I mean, of course they did, okay? God has said that, I was going to go up with you, but now I'm not going with you. I'll send an angel. So Moses is beginning to intercede here with God. The people mourn. So when the people heard this in chapter 33, verse 4, they heard the sad word. They went into mourning, and none of them put on his ornaments. They didn't put on jewelry. They didn't put on the things to make it look like they were a people of celebration. And so now we get this look in verses 7 through 11 of chapter 33 into the prayer life of Moses. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. Moses had a place for not only him, but for the people to go and meet God. But when Moses went up, some special things happened. Okay, all the people would go out there, but in verse 9 it says, "Whenever Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud, there was a pillar of cloud by day, a fire by night, that pillar of cloud would come down and would cover the entrance to the tent, and the Lord would speak to Moses." It says, when the people saw this pillar standing there at the entrance of the tent, it said they would fall down and worship at the entrance to the tent. And it says, "Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend." And so what I want you to understand is in these meetings, these times, Moses would come out and his face would be glowing. And so, I want you to see some New Testament things that speak of us, because at that time we would have had little choice but to do what they did. They used to come out to the tent, see Moses going up, see that pillar come down, and fall down on their faces and worship God. But they didn't draw near. But we're invited to draw near in Christ, okay? In 2 Corinthians 3:18 it says this, "But we all with unveiled face," Moses used to wear a veil when he came back. It says, "beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed." What I want you to understand is that as we are approaching God in prayer, please understand this first. You may be seeking something from God, but God is seeking something from you, and what he's seeking from you is you, okay? We all, with unveiled face, we are being transformed by the same glory, from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit. Okay, 2 Corinthians 4:6, "For God, who said, 'Let the light shine out of darkness,' is the one who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ." God calls us into this place of deep revelation in him. And so to understand, we're going to conclude here, because we're going to pick up from here next week. And, it doesn't quite complete the notes that you have in front of you. That's because we're going to pick it up next week, and we'll see you then. God bless you.